Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The porcelain plate shattered against the marble floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the silent, terrified cafeteria, signaling that the heir of the Blackwood Empire had refused to eat again. Julian didn't think. He simply moved, his body reacting before his mind could process the danger of approaching the small, trembling boy surrounded by weeping nannies and terrified security guards. Elian Blackwood, the 5-year-old crown prince of the city's most feared corporate dynasty, was clutching his stomach, his face a ghostly pale that spoke of critical hypoglycemia. The guards stepped forward to intercept Julian, their hands reaching for stun batons. But Julian ignored them, dropping to his knees beside the child and snapping open the humble, cat-themed bento box he had packed for his own lunch. The smell of savory, slow-simmered broth and caramelized tamagoyaki wafted into the air, cutting through the sterile scent of the private academy. "I know it's scary," Julian whispered, his voice trembling but firm, ignoring the red laser that suddenly appeared on his chest from a sniper on the mezzanine. "But if you don't eat, the monsters win." He held out a spoon. The room held its breath. The boy, who hadn't taken solid food in 6 days due to a psychosomatic rejection of all nourishment, leaned forward. His small lips parted. He took the bite, and then the double doors blew open. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet 20 degrees instantly. They walked in with a synchronized stride that felt more like a military invasion than a parental visit. The Blackwood triplets. Alastair, the CEO with eyes like chips of ice. Baron, the COO with a scar cutting through his eyebrow and a perpetual sneer. And Selim, the silent CFO who looked at the world as if he wanted to disassemble it. They were 3 identical iterations of masculine perfection, radiating an alpha pheromone so potent it made the betas in the room nauseous. They wore charcoal suits that cost more than Julian's entire life earnings, and they stopped as one, their gazes locking onto the Omega kneeling on the floor feeding their son. "He's eating," Alastair said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in Julian's chest. "He hasn't eaten for a week," Baron growled, stepping closer, his nostrils flaring as he scented the air. "What did you put in it? Drugs? A compulsion charm? Love?" Julian snapped, immediately regretting his sass as 3 pairs of predatory eyes narrowed. He shielded Elian with his slim body. "I put care into it. Something you 3 clearly outsource." Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Selim, the quiet one, tilted his head. "Pack him up." "Excuse me." Julian squawked as a guard hauled him to his feet. "The boy eats his food," Alastair declared, buttoning his jacket as he turned to leave. "So, the cook comes with us. Bring the Omega. If the boy stops eating, feed the Omega to the dogs." The Blackwood estate was not a home. It was a fortress of glass and steel perched on the edge of a cliff, overlooking the churning ocean. It was beautiful, cold, and utterly devoid of life, much like the 3 men who owned it. Julian had been escorted, kidnapped, and deposited into a kitchen that was larger than his apartment building. He had been given strict instructions: prepare dinner. If Elian eats, Julian lives to see another sunrise. If Elian refuses, Julian would be investigated for attempted poisoning via withholding an antidote, and likely disappeared. It was an insane leap in logic, a plot hole in reality itself. Why would billionaires kidnap a kindergarten teacher instead of hiring a therapist? But as Julian chopped scallions with shaking hands, he realized the terrifying truth. They had hired everyone. World-renowned doctors, child psychologists, Michelin-star chefs. Elian had rejected them all. The boy was traumatized, mute since the accident that took his mother, and he only responded to genuine, unfiltered warmth, something money couldn't buy and the Blackwood brothers didn't possess. They were desperate, and desperate alphas were dangerous creatures. Julian prepared a simple meal. He didn't use the foie gras or the truffle oil stocked in the pantry. He made a warm, heart vegetable stew with rabbit-shaped rice balls. It was comfort food. It was safe. When he wheeled the cart into the dining room, the atmosphere was heavy. The triplets sat at the head of the long table, a Cerberus of judgment. Elian sat in a high chair, looking small and lost. Julian ignored the alphas. He bypassed the service station and pulled a chair right next to the boy. "Profound breach of protocol," Baron hissed, his hand tightening around a crystal wine glass. "Shut up," Julian murmured, not looking at him. "He doesn't like loud noises." Baron looked ready to murder, but Alistair held up a hand. "Wait." Julian focused on Elian. "Look, Elian. The bunny is swimming in the garden." He pointed to the rice ball in the stew. "Can you save him?" Elian's eyes, identical to his father's, but filled with innocence rather than malice, widened. He picked up his spoon. He ate the bunny, then the carrots, then the broth. For the first time in months, color returned to the child's cheeks. From the head of the table, the air pressure shifted. The predatory aggression radiating from the triplets changed into something else, something heavier, hotter. Intense intrigue mixed with a sudden, confusing possessiveness. "He's finishing the bowl," Selim noted, his voice raspy. "Who are you?" Alistair asked, leaning forward, his gaze dissecting Julian. "No one has gotten him to eat more than a cracker in weeks." "I'm Julian," he said, wiping a speck of broth from Elian's chin. "I'm a teacher." I listened to him. "You're an Omega," Baron corrected, inhaling deeply. "And you smell like vanilla and rain. It's distracting. I'm here to feed the child, not entertain the fathers." Julian stood up, his legs shaking but his chin held high. "May I go home now?" "No," the three brothers said in unison. "You stay," Alistair commanded. "You live here now. You are his nutritionist, his caretaker." "I have a life. A job. We bought the school an hour ago," Selim said calmly, checking his phone. "You've been promoted to private tutor. Your salary has been tripled. Your debt is paid. Your apartment lease is terminated. Your things are being moved into the East Wing." Julian stared at them, horrified. "You can't just buy people." "We didn't buy you," Baron smirked, a dark, dangerous glint in his eye. "We acquired your time. Exclusive rights. If you want to leave, you can file a complaint with HR. Oh wait, I am HR. 3 weeks passed in the gilded cage. Life at the Blackwood estate was a strange mix of terror and domesticity. Julian spent his days with Elian, slowly coaxing the boy out of his shell. They painted, they played in the garden, and they cooked together. The triplets were a constant, looming shadow. They were rarely home during the day, running their global empire, but at night, they returned like wolves to the den. They would watch Julian. They watched him read to Elian by the fire. They watched him fold Elian's laundry. They watched him exist. The tension was palpable. These were men who shared everything: power, money, enemies. Julian began to suspect they shared appetites as well. It came to a head on a stormy Tuesday. Thunder rattled the floor-to-ceiling windows. Elian was terrified of storms. The boy was curled up in Julian's bed in the guest wing, or rather, the master suite they had forced him into, shaking like a leaf. Julian was humming a lullaby, stroking the boy's hair, when the door creaked open. Alistair, Baron, and Selim stood there. They were drenched, shirts clinging to muscular chests, having just returned from a late-night site inspection. They smelled of ozone, rain, and agitated alpha pheromones. "He's crying," Alistair said, stepping into the room. "It's the thunder," Julian whispered. "Keep your voices down." Baron prowled to the side of the bed. "He should be in his own room. Alphas do not cower." "He is a child," Julian hissed, his protective instincts flaring brighter than his fear. "He is 5 years old. He needs comfort, not a lecture on masculinity from 3 emotionally stunted workaholics." The silence that followed was deafening. Selim stepped forward, his eyes dark. He reached out, not for the boy, but for Julian. His large hand cupped Julian's cheek. "You have a sharp tongue for such a soft creature. Someone has to advocate for him." Julian leaned into the touch involuntarily before pulling back. "Since you won't." Elian stirred. The boy sat up, rubbing his eyes. He looked at the 3 imposing figures of his fathers, then turned and buried his face into Julian's neck, wrapping his small arms tight around Julian. "Papa," Elian mumbled, his voice rusty from disuse. The world stopped. The triplets froze. Elian hadn't spoken a word since his mother died 2 years ago. Not a single syllable. "Did he?" Alistair's voice broke, the icy facade cracking. "Papa," Elian said again, louder this time, clutching Julian's shirt. "Don't let them take me. Papa, stay." Julian's heart shattered and reformed in a single beat. He wrapped his arms around the boy. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetie. I'm right here." He looked up at the brothers. He expected anger. He expected them to be furious that their son had bestowed a parental title on a hired Omega. Instead, he saw hunger. Alistair dropped to his knees beside the bed, bringing him to eye level with Julian. Baron and Selim followed suit, surrounding the bed. The dynamic had shifted. They weren't looking at him as an employee anymore. They were looking at him as the missing piece of a puzzle they hadn't realized was broken. "He chose you," Baron whispered, his voice rough with an emotion he couldn't name. "The heir chose. That makes you." Selim trailed off, his hand moving to rest on Julian's knee. "Family," Alistair finished. The words sounded heavy, like a sentence and a vow combined. "And Blackwoods protect what is theirs." The atmosphere in the room thickened, the air charging with static. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm brewing in the eyes of the three alphas. "We have been negligent," Alistair admitted, his gaze dropping to his son, then back to Julian's lips. "We thought providing security and wealth was enough. We see now that we were wrong. We can learn," Baron added, his thumb brushing the inside of Julian's wrist, feeling the frantic pulse there. "But we are greedy men, Julian. If you are Papa, then you belong to the pack. All of it." Julian swallowed hard. "I'm not a possession." "No," Selim agreed, leaning in so close his breath ghosted over Julian's ear. "You are the center, the heart, and the heart must be guarded." The bliss of the domestic revelation was short-lived. 2 days later, the Triplets Alpha Corporation was hosting its annual gala. It was a mandatory event. The brothers insisted Julian attend. They wanted to parade him, not as a conquest, but as the miracle worker who saved the heir. Julian wore a white suit that hugged his frame, looking like a dove among ravens as he stood flanked by the brothers in their black tuxedos. Elian was with the nanny in the secure upper box. The champagne flowed. The music played, and Julian felt eyes on him. Not the lustful eyes of the brothers, but cold, malicious eyes. He was reaching for a canopy when a waiter bumped into him, slipping a glass of wine into his hand. "Compliments of Mr. Baron," the waiter muttered before vanishing. Julian frowned. Baron was standing 10 feet away, talking to a senator. But Julian was thirsty. He lifted the glass. The scent hit him first. Under the heavy notes of oak and blackberry, there was a faint, metallic tang. Bitter almond. Julian froze. He knew that smell. In his culinary training, he had learned about food safety, but also about the history of ingredients. Cyanide. His eyes darted up. He saw the waiter moving toward the VIP box. Toward Elian. Julian dropped the glass. It shattered, red wine staining the white carpet like blood. "Don't drink it," Julian screamed, abandoning all decorum. He sprinted toward the stairs, pushing past shocked socialites. The brothers turned, their instincts sharpening instantly. They saw Julian running. They saw the waiter pulling a device from his jacket near the door to Elian's box. "Julian!" Alistair roared. Julian didn't stop. He tackled the waiter just as the man raised a suppressed pistol aimed at the glass of the VIP box. The gun went off. The bullet didn't hit the glass. It hit Julian. He felt the impact like a sledgehammer to the shoulder, spinning him around. He hit the ground hard, gasping for air. Chaos erupted. If the Blackwood brothers were intimidating in a boardroom, they were apocalyptic in a fight. Baron was on the gunman in a second, moving with a speed that blurred the vision. There was a sickening crunch of bone, and the threat was neutralized. Alistair and Selim were at Julian's side instantly. "Julian!" Alistair's voice was a raw, terrified scream. He gathered Julian into his arms, his pristine tuxedo soaking up the spreading red stain on Julian's white suit. "Elian!" Julian wheezed, clutching Alistair's lapel. "The waiter. Poison. Gun. He's safe. Baron has him." "You're safe." Selim pressed his hands over the wound, his face pale, his usual stoicism shattered. "Stay with us." "That is an order, Julian. Stay with us." "Does this mean?" Julian coughed, a faint smile touching his lips as darkness encroached. "I get a raise?" "You get everything," Alistair vowed, pressing his forehead against Julian's, tears tracking through the blood on his face. "You get the world. Just breathe. Damn you. Breathe." Waking up felt like floating through heavy syrup. The beep of a heart monitor was the metronome of his return to the living. Julian blinked his eyes open. He wasn't in a hospital. He was in the master suite of the estate, but it had been transformed into a sterile medical bay. He tried to move, but his hand was weighed down. He looked to his left. Alistair was asleep in a chair, his hand gripping Julian's left hand. He looked to his right. Selim was resting his head on the mattress, holding Julian's right hand. And at the foot of the bed, Baron was awake, cleaning a knife with a terrifyingly blank expression, guarding the door. "He's awake," Baron said softly. Instantly, the other two woke up. The intensity of their focus was overwhelming. "You idiot," Alistair rasped, leaning over him, brushing hair from Julian's forehead. "You reckless, beautiful idiot. You jumped in front of a gun." "He was aiming for Elian," Julian whispered. His shoulder throbbed, but he felt surprisingly warm. "We know," Selim said darkly. The man talked. "Before he expired. It was the rival consortium. They are being dismantled as we speak. Systematically. Financially. Physically. You saved our son," Alistair said, his voice thick. "You saved our heir." "I saved Elian," Julian corrected gently. "I didn't do it for the heir. I did it for the boy." The distinction hung in the air, heavy and profound. "We know." Baron holstered the knife and walked to the bed. The three alphas loomed over him, but the threat was gone. In its place was a heavy, unbreakable tether. "Elian asked for you," Alistair said. "He's sleeping in the next room. He wouldn't sleep until we promised to bring you back." "We are triplets," Selim murmured, his fingers tracing the bandage on Julian's shoulder. "We share a soul. We share a life. We thought we were complete. We were wrong." Baron leaned down, capturing Julian's lips in a kiss that was searing, possessive, and surprisingly tender. It was a claim. A brand. When they pulled apart, Alistair spoke, his eyes burning with blue fire. "You are not the nanny anymore, Julian. You are the omega of this house. You are the fourth pillar. You are ours." Julian looked at the three men, monsters to the world, but guardians to him. He thought of the little boy sleeping in the next room who called him Papa. He thought of the way they looked at him, as if he were the only source of light in their dark ocean. "And you," Julian whispered, pulling Alistair down for a kiss, "are going to have to learn to cook. Because I am on medical leave." The three most dangerous men in the city smiled. And that is how the dove tamed the Cerberus. If you enjoyed seeing Julian bring these arrogant alphas to their knees, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who tried to kill you? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt, masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art, for characters, BL, yaoi, man 1. Lying in hospital bed, pale skin, bandaged shoulder, messy brown hair, soft expression, looking up, man 2. Dominant alpha, black hair slicked back, wearing unbuttoned tuxedo shirt, kissing the hand of man 1. Intense gaze. Man 3 and man 4. Identical to man 2, standing protectively behind the bed, looking down with possessive love, dark suits. Background is luxurious bedroom converted to medical bay, for drip, warm ambient lighting, cinematic composition, sharp focus, emotional atmosphere.